He threw his pregnant wife into a storm, stole her dead father's inheritance, and used it to build a future with his mistress. She collapsed barefoot in the rain, seconds before a black Lincoln stopped. The man who stepped out didn't know her name, but the moment he saw her face, a 40-year debt roared back to life. Because she wasn't just a stranger. She was the daughter of the man who saved his empire. And now he's about to burn hers to the ground. But here's the question. When a billionaire declares war over a promise made to the dead, who survives the fallout? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to our story. A 61-year-old billionaire just spent $42 million of his own fortune to utterly destroy one man's life. Not for revenge, not for business, but for a promise he made to his mother 40 years ago. And it all started on a stormy night like this, with a single, barefoot woman he found shivering on the side of the road, holding nothing but the secret to his own past. What you are about to see will change how you think about justice, kindness, and the debts we never knew we owed. By the end of this story, you'll understand why a single act of compassion can unravel a web of lies decades in the making. But this story isn't what you think it is. It's not about a rich man saving a poor woman. It's about fate closing a loop that was opened half a century ago. To understand how we got here, to understand the fury behind that gavel, I need to take you back to the moment it all began. But before I reveal the shocking connection this billionaire had to the woman in the rain, you need to understand the 3 words that cost her everything she ever loved. The rain didn't just fall that night. It clawed at the windows and beat against the roof of the tidy brick home on Sycamore Lane. This wasn't just a storm, it was a judgment, and inside, the verdict had already been delivered. Her name is Clara Dean, and just moments ago, she believed she had a husband, a home, and a future. Now, all she had was the cold, wet porch boards beneath her feet. From behind the slammed door, her husband Richard's voice was cold and muffled. "You made your choice, Clara. Now live with it." Her choice? It wasn't a choice. It was a demand for the truth. The kind of truth that shatters a life into a million pieces. Hours earlier, Clara stood in their living room, her hand trembling as she held a bank statement. "Where is it, Richard?" she asked, her voice shaking but firm. "My father's inheritance. The account is empty. The entire $150,000 gone." Richard stood across from her, dripping with the easy charm of a successful real estate broker. "It's an investment, honey," he said smoothly. "For us, for the baby, a new development deal. It's going to double our money in 6 months. I was going to surprise you." It was the lie he'd practiced in the mirror. But Clara had seen another document first. A receipt. Not for a land deal, but for a commercial lease. A lease for a high-end fashion boutique downtown. She threw a second piece of paper on the coffee table. A surprise? For us or for her? This lease is in her name, Richard. Vivian Cross, how could you? That was my father's money. It was all I had left of him. And that's when the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. From the hallway, Vivian Cross emerged, a smirk playing on her lips. She held a framed wedding photo of Clara and Richard, inspecting it with casual disdain. "He invested it in me, darling," Vivian said, "because I'm the future. You're just the past, and frankly, this picture is tacky." Vivian let the photo frame slip from her fingers. It hit the hardwood floor, and the glass shattered with a sound like a gunshot in the tense room. Some betrayals are quiet, a slow poisoning of trust. But this was an execution. Back on the porch in the pouring rain, Clara's mind was reeling. It wasn't just the money, it was the casual cruelty of it all. The man she had promised her life to had taken the one thing meant to protect their child and used it to build a palace for another woman, while his pregnant wife stood barefoot in a storm. She banged on the door, her fists weak against the solid wood. "Richard, please, at least give me my phone, my coat. I have nowhere to go." But it wasn't Richard who answered. The porch light flicked on, casting a harsh yellow glare. Vivian stood behind the storm door, a silhouette of smug victory. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the rain. "You don't belong here anymore. This is my house now. Richard and I have a future to plan. You should have stayed silent." Vivian flicked the porch light off, plunging Clara back into darkness, silence. That was the price of her home, the price of her marriage. To simply sit by and allow her father's memory to be stolen. She had refused, and this was her punishment. Clara stumbled off the porch, the sharp gravel of the driveway digging into her bare feet. She clutched her swollen belly, a primal, protective instinct taking over. Her sobs were now silent, ragged breaths, stolen by the wind. Every car that drove past was just a blur of red and white light, a ghost in the downpour. Each one a reminder of her invisibility. No phone, no money, no family in the state. She was a castaway on the shores of her own life. She walked, with no destination in mind, moving away from the life that had just been ripped away. The cold was seeping into her bones now, a dangerous, deep chill. Her legs felt heavy, her vision starting to blur at the edges. The world was tilting, the roar of the storm fading into a dull hum. She stumbled near the edge of Old Mill Road, her knees giving way. She collapsed onto the wet grass of the shoulder, curling into a ball, her one hand still protectively over her child. This is how it ends, she thought. A forgotten woman on the side of a forgotten road. Her eyes fluttered, the world fading to black. Through her closing eyelids she saw one last thing. A pair of bright, piercing headlights slicing through the darkness. They weren't speeding past like the others. They were slowing down. The car, a long black Lincoln Continental, pulled over. Its engine a low, powerful hum against the storm. The back door opened, and a silhouette of a man stepped out into the rain. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But what he was about to do would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to justice, ruin, and a redemption nobody saw coming. The man who stepped out of the Lincoln was not a savior in a shining suit of armor. He was older, his face etched with the kind of deep lines that come from decades of pressure and resolve. His eyes, however, held a profound gentleness. This was Samuel Grant. And in the world of finance and industry, his name was spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence. But here, on the side of a forgotten road, he was just a man with an umbrella. He knelt down, not too close, respecting her space. His voice was a low, calm baritone, a stark contrast to the howling storm. "Ma'am, are you all right? Can you hear me?" Clara flinched, trying to push herself up. Her mind was a fog of fear. Every stranger is a threat. "Stay away, please. Just leave me alone," she said, her voice weak and chattering. In her world, help had become a four-letter word. Trust was a currency she no longer possessed. But Samuel didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply waited, a patient anchor in her storm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "My name is Samuel. It's not safe for you out here, for you or your child. Let me at least get you somewhere warm and dry, no questions asked." He said the two words that cut through her terror. Your child. In that moment, he wasn't just seeing a victim. He was seeing a mother, and that small acknowledgement was enough. He took off his heavy wool overcoat and gently draped it over her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, a shock to her frozen skin. It smelled faintly of cedar and old leather, the smell of safety, of stability. Picture this scene. The stark contrast. The barefoot, pregnant woman in a thin sweater, drenched and broken, and the billionaire industrialist shielding her with an umbrella, wrapping her in a coat that likely cost more than her car. This wasn't charity. It was something deeper. A recognition. He helped her to her feet, his touch firm but respectful, and guided her to the open door of the Lincoln. The interior was bathed in a soft, warm light. The moment that car door closed, the world went silent. The roar of the rain faded to a gentle hum. For the first time in hours, Clara could hear her own heartbeat. She sank into the plush leather seat, the exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. The driver, a discreet man in his 50s, awaited instructions. Samuel got in beside Clara, leaving a respectable distance between them. "Just drive. Arthur, keep it smooth." As the car pulled away, Clara stared out the window, watching the rain-streaked lights of her old life disappear into the blackness. What would you have done in her shoes? Would you trust the stranger? It's a question we all ask ourselves, but you never know the answer until you're the one left out in the rain. After a few minutes, her shivering subsided. She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you stop? No one else even slowed down." Samuel turned his gaze from the window to her. His mind drifted back 40, 50 years, to the son of a janitor from Selma, Alabama, a boy who had learned all too early what it felt like to be invisible. "My mother taught me something a long time ago," he said. "She used to say, 'The world will always have its storms, Samuel, and it will always have people caught in them. When you see someone left out in the rain, you stop. You don't ask if they deserve it. You don't ask if they're rich or poor. You just stop." Tears began to well in Clara's eyes again, but this time they weren't from pain or fear. They were from a pinprick of gratitude so sharp it hurt. My husband, he threw me out. He took everything. My father's money. For another woman," she said, the words tumbling out in broken pieces. She told him her story, the betrayal, the humiliation, the shattering of the photograph. Samuel didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say it will be okay. He simply listened. He bore witness to her pain, and in doing so, he gave her the one thing her husband had stolen: dignity. The car continued its silent journey, eventually pulling up to a sprawling, white-columned estate overlooking the Cumberland River. Samuel led her inside, into a grand foyer warmed by a gentle fire. A kind-faced housekeeper appeared and led Clara to a guest suite that was larger than her first apartment. Standing in the middle of the room, wrapped in a plush robe, Clara clutched Samuel's heavy overcoat like a life raft. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "Get some sleep," Samuel replied. "That will be enough payment. We can figure out the rest in the morning." He closed the door gently, leaving her in silence. For the first time that night, Clara was safe. But while Clara slept, Samuel Grant did not. He sat in his study, the fire crackling. Her story had stirred something in him, an old, familiar anger at the sight of a powerful man preying on the vulnerable. It was an injustice, and Samuel Grant did not tolerate injustice. Hold on. This is where most stories would have the billionaire write a check and call it a night. But Samuel Grant was about to do something else entirely. First, he made a phone call, not to the police, but to his personal attorney. "Michael, wake up," he said into the phone. "I need you to run a background check. The husband's name is Richard Dean, a real estate broker. The wife, her name is Clara Dean. Her maiden name was Whitmore." He paused. "Yes, that's right. Whitmore. Find everything you can." He hung up and stared into the fire. The name felt strangely familiar, an echo from a distant past he couldn't quite place. An hour later, as the storm outside finally began to subside, Samuel's phone rang. It was his attorney. The background check on Richard Dean had revealed the expected greed and deceit, but it was what he'd found on Clara's late father, Henry Whitmore, that made the old lawyer's voice tremble. It was a name from a 40-year-old file. A file Samuel thought he'd never see again. A file containing the secret to his entire empire. Samuel sat in his study, the voice of his lawyer, Michael, crackling from the speakerphone. "Samuel, are you there? Did you hear me? Henry Whitmore, her father. He was one of the original 6 investors in Grant Steel back in '85. Grant Steel. Before it was Samuel Grant Industries, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. It was just a struggling factory on the wrong side of the tracks. A dream held together by rust, grit, and the sheer force of one man's will." Samuel slowly lowered the phone. He walked over to a row of antique filing cabinets, his movements stiff with disbelief. His fingers, usually so steady, trembled slightly as they traced over old, worn files. 40 years of acquisitions and corporate warfare had passed since he'd last touched them. 40 years of building an empire so vast, he'd almost forgotten the single brick that had saved it all. He pulled out a thin, yellowed folder. On the tab, 2 words were typed: H. Whitmore, seed investor. He opened the folder. Inside were old onion skin papers, a stock certificate, a canceled check for $25,000, and a handwritten letter. And just like that, the years melted away. Samuel Grant wasn't a 61-year-old billionaire anymore. He was 21 again, standing in a dusty, empty factory, his grease-stained overalls a testament to his failing dream. He was arguing with two stern-looking bankers. "The loan is denied, Mr. Grant," one of them said. "The board feels your enterprise is too high risk." "High risk?" young Samuel shot back, his voice filled with a desperate fire. "Or are you just not used to seeing a black man from Selma trying to build something for himself? I just need the capital to get the furnaces running." The other banker was patronizing. "Son, it's not about that. It's just business. We wish you the best of luck." They walked away, leaving him in the silence of his failure. He was days away from bankruptcy. Then a car pulled up. A white man in his late 40s got out. He was dressed simply, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Samuel Grant. I'm Henry Whitmore. I heard about what you're trying to do here. Mind if I take a look around?" Henry spent an hour walking the factory floor, talking about the quality of the steel and the ingenuity of the furnace design. They ended up sitting on crates, sharing coffee from a thermos. "Why are you here, Mr. Whitmore?" Samuel asked. "Everyone else has already said no." Henry took a slow sip of coffee. "When I was a boy, my father's farm was about to go under. A neighbor gave him a loan. He said something I never forgot. You don't bet on the weather. You bet on the man holding the shovel." He looked Samuel square in the eyes. "I think you're a good man holding a shovel, Mr. Grant." The next day, Henry Whitmore liquidated a portion of his own savings, money he was saving for his own daughter's future, and invested it in Grant Steel. It was an act of faith from a white man in the deeply segregated South who chose to see character instead of color. Back in the present, Samuel held the old handwritten letter from the file. He read it aloud, his voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Grant, enclosed is my investment. I believe in your vision. More importantly, I believe in you. Do good work. Make us all proud. Sincerely, Henry Whitmore." Henry Whitmore's belief had been the seed from which Samuel's entire empire had grown. And now, fate had delivered his daughter to Samuel's doorstep. The next morning, Samuel found Clara in a sunlit breakfast room. "There's something you should know," he said, sliding the old file folder across the table. "Something about your father." He told her the story. He showed her the letter. He spoke of her father's kindness, his belief, and his courage. Clara listened, tears streaming down her face, tears of profound, aching pride. In the midst of her own devastation, she was given this gift. "He never told me," she whispered. "All this time, I thought everything he left me was gone, but it wasn't." "No, it wasn't," Samuel said. "What your father gave me was a chance, and now I'm going to give you one. You and your child will want for nothing. We will get back what that man stole from you. I give you my word." For the first time since the storm, Clara felt hope. In the days that followed, a quiet routine formed. She began to heal. The hollow look in her eyes was replaced by a quiet strength. But she warned herself not to get too comfortable. Her past wasn't done with her yet. One evening, she was watching the local news. A business report came on, showing a picture of a smiling, confident Richard Dean at a charity gala, his arm wrapped possessively around Vivian Cross. They looked untouchable, a power couple, building their new empire with the rubble of her life. Clara's blood ran cold. But then, the news report cut to a different shot, showing the neighborhood where Richard's new development was planned. As the camera panned across the street, it caught a familiar black Lincoln Continental parked just down the block. Stepping out of it was not Samuel, but his private investigator, taking pictures of Richard's new office. The fight had already begun, quietly, in the shadows. And Richard Dean had no idea what was coming for him. Healing is a fragile thing. It arrives quietly, builds itself on moments of silence and safety, and can be shattered by a single sound. For Clara, sitting peacefully in the mansion's garden, that sound was the vibration of a burner phone. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was Richard's, but it was choked, feigning emotion. "Clara? Thank God, I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay?" It's the oldest trick in the manipulator's handbook. Feign concern. Play the victim. Her voice immediately hardened. "What do you want, Richard?" "To talk," he pleaded. "Clara, I haven't slept. What I did, it was a monstrous mistake. Vivian, she's not who I thought she was. All she cares about is the money. But you and I, we had something real, and our baby. Our baby. Clara, I want to be a father. I need to make this right." His words were poison, coated in honey, targeting her greatest vulnerability, the future of her child. Later, she relayed the conversation to Samuel, pacing his study. He sounded different. Remorseful. He said he wants to sign everything over, give me a clean break, and set up a trust for the baby. He just wants to meet to sign the divorce papers. Samuel's voice was low and carried immense weight. "Clara, a man who can throw his pregnant wife out in a storm doesn't find a conscience in 2 weeks. He finds a new strategy. This is not remorse. This is a move on a chessboard. He wants something from you." "And what if you're wrong?" she asked, frustrated and torn. "I don't want a war, Samuel. I just want this to be over." Samuel advised, "I cannot tell you what to do, but if you go, my lawyer Michael will accompany you, and he will review every single page before you pick up a pen." They met at a quiet cafe. Richard arrived, dressed down, looking tired. "Clara, you look beautiful," he began, then glanced at Michael. "And you brought a babysitter." "I'm her legal counsel, Mr. Dean," Michael said, his voice like ice. "Let's get to it." Richard placed a thick folder on the table. "It's all in here, Clara. A full dissolution of assets. The house is yours. A life insurance policy for the baby. And this last part is just the standard transfer of your father's remaining stocks to finalize the settlement. It gives you everything." He spoke directly to her heart, bypassing her legal protection. He made it sound like a surrender. Michael reached for the folder, but Richard placed a hand on it, looking directly at Clara. "Please, Clara, can we have one moment without the lawyers? This is about our family. I'm trying to do the right thing here." Clara looked at Richard's pleading eyes. She thought about a future free of court battles. Against her better judgment, she made a fatal mistake. "It's okay," she said to Michael. "Let me see it." She pulled the folder towards her, flipping through the complex pages. Richard pointed to the last page. "That's the main signature page for the asset transfer. It finalizes everything." She picked up the pen and, with a deep breath, signed her name. Richard exhaled, a slow, triumphant release of breath. "Thank you, Clara," he said, gathering the documents. "You won't regret this." He walked out without looking back. Michael's voice was grim. "Clara, let me see the copy." He took the papers, his face going pale as he read a small, dense paragraph just above her signature. "Oh, you clever son of a bitch." "What? What is it?" Clara asked. "This isn't a transfer to you, Clara," Michael said, seething. He buried it in the legalese. "You just signed over the full power of attorney for your entire inheritance, what was left of it, directly to his holding company. You didn't secure your assets. You just gave him the keys to the rest of the kingdom." The world stopped. The quiet murmur of the cafe faded into a deafening roar in Clara's ears. She had been played, again. Back in Samuel's study, she was completely broken, sobbing uncontrollably. Samuel stood by the window, his back to her, his hands clenched into tight fists. He was radiating a cold, still fury. Thunder cracked outside. The clear sky had turned a dark, bruised purple. The storm had returned. He turned from the window, his eyes blazing. "He didn't just steal your money, Clara. He weaponized your hope. He didn't just disrespect you, he disrespected the memory of your father." He walked to his desk and picked up the phone. His voice was no longer gentle. It was cold, sharp, and absolute. This was never about the money. It was about dignity. And I promise you, by the time I am finished, Richard Dean will have neither. He dialed a number, not to his lawyer, but to the head of his corporate acquisitions team, a ruthless woman known as the Shark. His instructions were simple and sealed Richard Dean's fate. "Helena? Liquidate $7 million from the reserve fund. I want you to buy every single debt instrument connected to Dean Real Estate. Every loan, every line of credit. We're not going to sue him. We're going to own him." What followed was not a declaration of war. It was a silent financial strangulation. Imagine a house of cards. Richard Dean had built an empire that looked impressive from the outside, but it was held up by debt, leverage, and other people's money. And Samuel's team began to remove the cards. One by one, Richard Dean didn't even know who was attacking him. He scrambled, trying to move money, trying to secure new loans. But every door was shut. Every escape route was blocked. The financial python Samuel had released was coiling around him, and all he could feel was the pressure building, crushing the air from his lungs. The facade of his life began cracking. Vivian, panicked, held a stack of unpaid invoices for her boutique. "What is going on, Richard? My suppliers haven't been paid. You promised the money from Clara's inheritance would be a permanent investment. Where is it?" "It's a cash flow issue, a temporary market downturn. I'm handling it," he said, sweating through his expensive shirt. Vivian's voice dripped with venom. "You're handling it? Richard, you look like you're about to have a heart attack. You lied to me. You said you were a titan. You're nothing but a cheap con artist who got lucky." And there it was, the truth of their relationship. A business partnership built on greed. With the money gone, the partnership was dissolved. Meanwhile, Clara was no longer a passive victim. Working with Samuel's lawyers, she methodically went through old bank statements and emails. "Here," she said, pointing to her screen. "This is the email where Richard explains the investment. And this is the wire transfer from my inheritance account, dated October 12th. And this is the incorporation filing for Vivian's boutique, dated October 13th. The money went from my account, through a shell company, and into her business in less than 24 hours. It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of wire fraud and embezzlement. She was no longer the woman shivering in the rain. She was the architect of her own justice. The final blow wasn't financial. It was public. Samuel gave the mountain of evidence to a tenacious local journalist. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. The headline was devastatingly simple. Nashville real estate mogul. Richard Dean accused of defrauding pregnant wife to fund mistress's boutique. It had everything. Greed, betrayal, a vulnerable victim, and a villain everyone loved to hate. The city erupted. Social media became a virtual courtroom. This is the moment of truth, and I want to know where you stand. After everything he did, what does Richard Dean deserve? Comment justice if you think he should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, or comment ruin if you think losing his company, his reputation, and his fortune is punishment enough. Let's see what you think in the comments below. Richard Dean's company imploded overnight. His investors pulled out. His partners abandoned him. The pinnacle, his prized development, was seized by its new debt holders, Samuel Grant Industries. A few weeks later, Clara and Samuel walked by the river on his estate. "It's over," Clara said. "Thank you, Samuel." "The legal battle is over," he replied, looking out at the water. "But justice is more than that. Watching a man fall is not justice. Justice is only complete when it helps others stand again." With Richard's assets seized, Samuel could have absorbed the money back into his empire. Instead, he decided to build a permanent shelter. The next several months saw the plan come to life. Clara's belly grew larger as she worked alongside Samuel, meeting with social workers and touring shelters. Then came the day she was in a hospital bed, holding a newborn baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket. She was crying tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Her name is Grace," she told Samuel. Grace, for the unearned kindness she had been shown, for the second chance she and her mother had been given. In the spring, a dedication ceremony was held outside a beautifully renovated historic building. A banner hung over the entrance, the Grace House Foundation, a safe harbor for women and children. A crowd of reporters, pastors, and community leaders had gathered. Clara, radiant and strong, stood at a podium holding baby Grace. "A year ago, I found myself in a storm," she said, her voice clear and confident. "I was lost, and I thought I had lost everything, but a stranger stopped for me. And he didn't just offer me shelter from the rain. He showed me that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths." The crowd applauded warmly. It felt like a perfect ending. But just as the applause began to die down, a figure emerged from the back of the crowd. A woman looking gaunt and defeated, her clothes worn, her face pale. All eyes turned to her, a collective gasp rippling through the attendees. It's Vivian, and beneath her thin coat, it's unmistakable. She, too, is pregnant, and utterly alone. A hush fell over the celebration. The polite applause died in the air, replaced by a wave of whispers. This was Vivian Cross. The other woman, the architect of Clara's pain. To the crowd, her presence felt like a violation, a final, audacious insult. Every instinct, every ounce of playground justice screamed for her to be cast out. What would you do in that moment, after all the pain, all the humiliation, when the person who tried to destroy you shows up at the monument of your survival, asking for a piece of the grace they never gave you? Every fiber in Clara's being wanted to turn away, to give Vivian the same cold shoulder the world had once given her, to let her feel, just for a moment, what it's like to be left out in the rain. But then she looked down at the child in her arms, at Grace, a baby born not from vengeance, but from a stranger's kindness. She looked at Vivian's swollen belly, and she didn't see the face of her enemy. She saw the reflection of her own past terror, a mother alone and afraid for her unborn child. Samuel moved to Clara's side. He spoke only to her, his voice a low, steady anchor in her emotional storm. Your father bet on the man holding the shovel. He didn't ask if I deserved it. He saw someone trying to build something. Look at her, Clara. What do you see? He paused. Revenge feels good for a moment. Justice is supposed to last forever. And sometimes the hardest mercy is the truest justice. The hardest mercy is the truest justice. The words hung in the drizzling rain. This wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about absolving Vivian of her sins. It was about choosing what the Grace House would ultimately stand for. Clara took a deep breath. She handed baby Grace to a trusted friend, stepped down from the podium, and walked toward Vivian. Vivian flinched as she approached, bracing herself for the righteous anger she knew she deserved. Their eyes met. In Vivian's, Clara saw the ruins of a life built on a lie. We later learned that Richard had fled the country days after his assets were frozen, taking what little cash Vivian had left and leaving her with nothing but debts and their unborn child. Clara stopped directly in front of her. She looked Vivian in the eyes, and with a quiet, steady voice she spoke the words that once defined her own agony. No woman deserves to be left out in the rain. And with that, Clara turned, walked to the large wooden door of the Grace House and opened it wide. It was an invitation, an offer of sanctuary. Vivian broke down, her body shaking with ragged, silent sobs. She stumbled forward toward the open door, toward the light and warmth inside. And then something remarkable happened. The crowd began to applaud. It was soft, sustained, and full of emotion. They were not applauding charity, they were applauding character. They were applauding the difficult, beautiful, and radical act of compassion. The camera leaves the crowd and finds Samuel Grant. He isn't watching Vivian or Clara. He has turned away slightly, his gaze directed upward. A single tear traces a path down his cheek, mingling with the rain. His empire was worth billions, but in that moment, none of it mattered. Only a 40-year-old promise finally and completely fulfilled. He whispered to the sky, his voice so quiet it's almost lost in the rain, a private conversation between a son and his mother. Mama. I stopped. Where are they now? Richard Dean was eventually apprehended, but his life of luxury was replaced by one of constant paranoia. He lost everything that ever mattered. Vivian gave birth to a healthy son. With the help of Grace House, she got a job, found an apartment, and is slowly, painstakingly rebuilding a life of integrity for her child. This story teaches us three crucial things. First, that justice isn't just about tearing down the guilty, it's about building up the innocent. Second, that our deepest wounds can often become the source of our greatest compassion. And finally, that a single act of kindness, like a single seed, can grow into a forest of redemption that shelters generations. So now I have to ask you the question that sits at the heart of this entire story. What would you have done if you were in Clara's shoes? Would you have opened the door? Share your honest answer in the comments. We all want to believe we'd make the right choice, but the truth is often more complicated. If this story moved you, and you believe that compassion is a strength, not a weakness, then subscribe to this channel. We don't just tell stories here. We explore the very best of what human beings are capable of.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.